It's September 5th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's Indo-Pacific diplomacy in Indonesia and India this week. President Yoon is off to Indonesia today for a three-day meeting with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. His multilateral diplomacy will continue into this weekend at the G20 New Delhi summit. North Korea's Kim Jong-un is reportedly planning to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin for arms talks, while Moscow has suggested that the North take part in joint naval drills with Russia and China in what would be a first for the regime. Tens of thousands of school teachers in South Korea went on strike on Monday to demand a better protection at work, following the deaths of colleagues who allegedly suffered bullying by parents. President Yoon begins his week-long diplomacy push, heading to Indonesia and India while he'll attend the annual summits of the Southeast Asian nations and the G20 economies. He'll be expanding Korea's multilateral diplomacy on a global level. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young follows this report as she travels with the president.
President Yoon embarks on a diplomatic super week, travelling to Indonesia and India to attend key multilateral summits and at least 14 bilateral meetings with other world leaders. Yoon's first stop is Jakarta, where some 27 heads of government and international organisations are convening for the three-day meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. After a dinner with Korean expats on Tuesday, the president will hold a bilateral dialogue with the 10-member bloc the following morning. He will build on the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, which he presented last November in Cambodia, as a key part of South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy that strives for freedom, peace and prosperity in the region.
President Yoon will attend the ASEAN-related summit in person for the second straight year. Our intention to pursue the Korean-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative in earnest will be clear, as we announce plans to strengthen cooperation in cyber and maritime security and digital innovation in particular.
Yoon will also attend the ASEAN +3 meeting, joined by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese Premier Li Qiang. As the rotating chair of the Northeast Asian trio, Yoon plans to address how to jointly fulfill the vision of the East Asian community through cooperation. Then, zooming on security issues on Thursday at the East Asia Summit, the president will ask world leaders for a strong response to North Korea's missile provocations and ongoing nuclear program by curbing its illegal financing schemes such as cryptocurrency stealing. Also, as part of his official visit to Indonesia, Yoon will hold a bilateral summit with his counterpart Joko Widodo at the presidential palace on Friday. A roundtable of major Korean and Indonesian corporate leaders will also take place during his time in Jakarta.
At this event, President Yoon plans to evaluate the achievements of economic cooperation with Indonesia so far and present cooperation plans for the next 50 years, including strengthening supply chains, responding to global agendas, and exchange of future generations.
With his itinerary extending to the G20 conference in New Delhi, Yoon will engage in further summitry on the sidelines of both multilateral meetings, with 14 bilaterals confirmed, including with India, and possibly 6 more, according to the top office. Marking the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations with both Indonesia and India this year, a presidential official said Monday that Seoul sees great potential for synergy in aligning their national interests amid growing geopolitical and ideological tensions in the region. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The first week of September is set to be an eventful one on the diplomatic front, with ASEAN-related meetings and the G20 summit taking place starting from today. For more, let's turn to Professor Kim Jae-chun this morning. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Professor Kim, President Yoon is set to sit down for around 14 rounds of bilateral talks at the upcoming summit in Indonesia and India. Now, the question is, why so many? I mean, why is he looking to achieve here?
Because this is a golden opportunity to promote South Korea's economic diplomacy, because ASEAN countries and India as well, these countries are becoming more and more important in terms of economic opportunities, because many countries, including South Korea, are now trying to rely less on China economically. So many countries, including South Korea, are looking for alternatives, and the alternatives are these countries, Southeast Asian countries and India. I think the Yoon government understands this, so President Yoon wants to capitalize on these important diplomatic events, ASEAN-related summits in Indonesia, and then G20 in India. He'll be having as many bilateral summits as possible, some, 14 to 20 rounds of bilateral summits. And the major objective, I think, is to promote South Korea's economic diplomacy.
Right, the timing of these summits can't be any better. Now, like you said, sales diplomacy will top Yoon's trip this time. That's why major conglomerate leaders are tagging along with him to Indonesia this time. Now, how much more successful will his trip be, considering all these factors this time?
So far, I think President Yoon's sales diplomacy has been quite successful. In my personal opinion, I think has been paying off. There is a sign that South Korea's export to Southeast Asia has increased after President Yoon's sales diplomacy. And it's not just the number, I think. I think it's the attitude that matters more, the attitude of President Yoon, the words of President Yoon saying that I am #1 salesperson of South Korea. Just let me know if I can be of any help, I'll be there. So the attitude is quite encouraging, I think, encouraging to South Korea's business leaders. So I heard that business leaders think very highly of President Yoon's sales diplomacy. I'm pretty sure that the upcoming trips will be very important in terms of sales diplomacy, given the track record of President Yoon's diplomacy, sales diplomacy. So I think the upcoming trips will be quite successful as well.
Right, President Yoon's rather welcoming attitude has been a helpful factor in terms of, improving ties with other nations, especially when it comes to economy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So, as I said, yeah.
Now,
So
Professor
yes,
Kim, if I may, will the ASEAN +3 summit include a discussion on a possible summit between South Korea, Japan, and China? I mean, within the year, how likely is it that the three sides will actually sit down for a summit?
It's really hard to tell at this stage, but one thing for sure is that South Korea is entertaining this idea very seriously. I mean, the idea to hold a trilateral summit. Trilateral summit hasn't taken place in several years. But now the COVID lockdown is over, and it's South Korea's turn to host the trilateral summit this year. And I think South Korea is in good stead here because the secretariat for that trilateral is located in Seoul. Sure, there are many hurdles that three countries need to cross to hold that summit this year. Release of Fukushima wastewater is not helping either, but there is a sign that China is interested in trilateral summit because there has been a couple of forums organized by the secretariat for the trilateral, and China participated in those forums. So, I think prospect is not that bright, but still, because it's not going to be President Xi who needs to attend this venue. It's going to be rather Prime Minister Li Chang. So that, I think, is a lesser burden on the part of China. In case the trilateral summit takes place this year.
Right. South Korea could be playing as a bridge to narrow that gap between Beijing and Tokyo that they currently have over the Fukushima wastewater release. Now, the possibility of the trilateral summit cannot be ruled out. But Professor Kim, you just mentioned the Chinese President Xi Jinping not attending the summit. What do you think the reason is?
I think it has something to do with the domestic situations in China. Economy is in bad shape, so President Xi needs to concentrate more on domestic economic situations rather than traveling abroad for diplomacy. And on top of that, he just came back from South Africa to attend the BRICS summit. So traveling to Indonesia and then to India can be a little bit too much. I mean, given President Xi's tight schedule. You know, some pundits are saying that President Xi is not going to India because of the territorial dispute with India, and President Xi doesn't want to confront President Biden, but I don't think that's the reason. I think it has more to do with President Xi's busy domestic schedules and needs to concentrate more on domestic situations.
Right. President Xi appears to be quite occupied at the moment. Now, cooperation with China is almost inevitable with between South Korea and China. Now, how can South Korea really sort out the things with China, especially in the midst of China's economic instability that you just mentioned?
That's really a tough question, question to which I don't really have a good answer, to be perfectly honest with you.
Okay.
Economic relations between South Korea and China has been already difficult, but as it said, now China's economic difficulty is not going to help either in this situation. I think China still is a very important market for South Korea's products. China, simply put, is a geo-economic reality to South Korea. So geopolitically, I think South Korea's strategy has to be like strengthening the alliance partnership with the United States. However, in terms of geo-economic policies, I think South Korea needs to be a little bit more creative, and South Korea needs to come up with the ways in which South Korea can normalize economic relations with China. But as to how, I'm sorry, but I really don't have any good answers here.
All right, we'll get back to you in the near future. Professor Kim Jae-chun, thank you so much always for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
In the meantime, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may be sitting down with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss arms sales. The much speculated talks will reportedly take place in Russia within the month. Shin Se-byuk reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may travel to Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin this month, as the Kremlin has sought to acquire military equipment for use in the Ukraine war. According to the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson on Monday, Washington has the information that the North Korean leader expects to visit Russia to discuss an arms deal. The likely venue for the two leaders' meeting is the Far Eastern Federal University in Vladivostok, where the Eastern Economic Forum is scheduled to run from September 10th to 13th. While urging Pyongyang to abide by its public commitments not to sell arms to Russia, Watson noted that Russia had convinced North Korea to sell artillery ammunition to Moscow during Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's visit to Pyongyang in late July. The U.S. State Department also called for an immediate halt to arms trade between North Korea and Russia, stating that such dealings violate UN Security Council resolutions. The expected visit follows Washington's earlier concerns that the two countries are in the middle of arms negotiations, which are advancing actively. Last week, the U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said Kim and Putin had exchanged letters pledging to deepen their cooperation. Pyongyang, however, has denied engaging in arms trade with Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia is discussing holding joint military drills with North Korea and China, comparing the plan to living in peace and harmony with neighbors. This information came from Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu on Monday. Earlier the same day, South Korea's National Intelligence Agency said that Russia formally proposed a joint naval drill with China during Shoigu's visit to North Korea in late July. If it happens, it would be the first time for Pyongyang to participate in drills of this kind. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country is ready to return to the Black Sea grain deal if and when agreements relevant to the accord are fulfilled. And his demands come after he held talks with his Turkish counterpart on Monday. Lee Seung-ja has more.
After holding talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he's willing to resume the landmark deal allowing Ukraine to export grain safely through the Black Sea, only if the West meets Moscow's demands on its own agricultural exports.
I would like to reiterate our principled position. We will be ready to consider the possibility of reanimating the grain deal. I once again told the President about this today, and we will do this as soon as all the agreements on lifting restrictions on the export of Russian agricultural products are fully implemented.
He also stressed that Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal did not affect global food markets, adding that there's no physical shortage of food. While Putin acknowledged that there are problems with the fair distribution of the grain, that has nothing to do with the grain deal itself. The Russian president emphasized that if his demands are met, the deal could be back in place within a matter of days. Meanwhile, his Turkish counterpart said Turkey and the UN, which brokered the original grain deal, have again put together a new package of proposals to resolve the issue. And with criticism that Russia's withdrawal from the deal will cause developing nations who rely on the imports of grains to suffer, Putin announced that Russia was close to finalizing an agreement to provide free grain to 6 African countries via Turkey. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Iran has slowed its uranium enrichment to close to weapons-grade levels, hinting at an attempt by Tehran to ease tensions with the U.S. That's according to an IAEA report seen by the Associated Press on Monday. The report indicates that Iran has 121.6 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%, compared to 114 kilograms in May and 87.5 kilograms in February, marking a far slower increase. However, the UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi warned that Tehran still has enough enriched uranium for several nuclear weapons. The latest report comes as the U.S. and Iran have been negotiating a prisoner swap, along with the release of billions of dollars in Iranian assets frozen in South Korea. Teachers across the country took to the streets instead of schools on Monday to mourn the passing of some of their colleagues and to demand stronger teachers' rights. The government and politicians promised to institute change. Kim Jong-sil reports.
Teachers in South Korea are grieving, and they're angry. They're grieving for lost fellow teachers, and they're angered by the lack of administrative measures to protect them. On the 49th day since the death of an elementary school teacher at Seoul Seoyi Elementary School, teachers from all over the country gathered in front of the National Assembly to mourn the young teacher who took her own life in July. They're also mourning 3 others from different schools who also committed suicide in just 4 days since last week.
Teachers dressed in black are demanding that the National Assembly change the law to better ensure teachers' rights, saying regular guidance should not be deemed child abuse.
The rally came amid strong opposition from the Education Ministry that said while it sympathizes with the teachers, the ministry also respects the rights of students to be educated, adding that the educators should remain at their posts in schools. However, this did not stop the teachers from taking leave from their schools to participate.
I think there must be revisions made to the Child Welfare Act to clear up the blurred lines of what defines child abuse on school grounds, to better protect teachers' rights during educational activities.
President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered the government on Monday to take the teachers' complaints seriously and to make every effort to establish their rights and normalize the education sector. The ruling People Power Party said it will make every effort to pass 4 major bills that are aimed at strengthening teachers' rights. While main opposition Democratic Party of Korea said education is the basis of our society and that it is the government's responsibility to make schools a safe environment. Both parties will discuss the bills at an assembly standing committee, and if all goes swiftly, they will be put to a vote at a plenary session as early as September 21st. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, where the first Africa Climate Summit is underway. Now organized by the African Union, the 5-day summit, which started on Monday local time, is centered on the theme of green growth and climate finance. It looks to address Africa's increasing exposure to climate change and to influence climate pledges and outcomes. Now, the continent of some 1.3 billion people currently produces only 4% of the world's emissions. But a report from October 2022 says that since the start of that year, at least 4,000 people were killed and 19 million affected by extreme weather events on the continent. Africa also loses some $7 to $15 billion annually to climate change. More than a dozen African leaders are attending the summit, including those from Burundi, Malawi, and Sierra Leone. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and former Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon are also in attendance, alongside US climate envoy John Kerry. Now, staying in Africa, the leader of a military coup in Gabon last week has been sworn in as the country's transitional president. In a televised ceremony on Monday in the capital of Libreville, General Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema pledged to bring free, transparent and credible elections. The coup last week overthrew President Ali Bongo, whose family had ruled over Gabon for the past 55 years. It came shortly after the local election commission declared Bongo had won an election that was marred by a lack of transparency and irregularities. The military leaders annulled the election results and placed Bongo under house arrest. Now, a new report says that invasive species cost the global economy at least $423 billion in 2019. Invasive alien mosquito species, black rats, and certain types of plants caused the most damage. According to the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service report on Monday, while some alien species have been introduced to regions to benefit local people, alien species that become invasive can cause major damage. This including loss of biodiversity, damage to ecosystems, and the extinction of other species. IPBES says that out of the 37,000 known alien species introduced around the world by human activities, at least 3,500 are harmful and invasive. The report notes that since 1970, the global economic cost of these species has quadrupled every decade. And finally, American rock singer and songwriter Janis Joplin and English reggae and pop band UB40 have been given stars on London's Camden Music Walk of Fame. The stars were unveiled on Monday as part of a multi-day ceremony, ending with a free music festival on Saturday. The Kinks, Buzzcocks and Billy Bragg also had their stars added to the Walk of Fame. They joined previous honorees including The Who, David Bowie and Amy Winehouse. Camden's Music Walk of Fame is a play on its Hollywood counterpart. It honors musical artists and creators who are influential, bring about industry breakthroughs, or have not received enough recognition.
Good morning. It was quite muggy yesterday with moisture in the air. Heat returns across much of Korea with a heat advisory reissued in many of the South Coast regions and inland areas. And afternoon highs will be hovering around 30 degrees Celsius under mostly to partly sunny skies today. High humidity will be of no help. There could be passing rain in upper inland areas and coastal regions near Jeollanam-do province during the day. And when it starts to rain, it could pour down 30 millimeters an hour along with thunder and lightning. The capital had warm overnight temperatures and afternoon highs in most parts will be 2 to 4 degrees higher than seasonal norms. So Seoul will go up to 32 degrees Celsius this afternoon, Chuncheon, Gwangju at 31 degrees. Then we can look forward to much brighter conditions with lower humidity, but the late summer heat wave will continue through the weekend. But at least we can have a taste of autumn in the mornings and evenings. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.